So our next speaker is Mr. Lloyd Gardner. Lloyd comes to us from Jamaica. I checked that, didn't I, Lloyd? I got that right. He's an environmental planner in private practice. He supports clients at a number of levels, from the local to the multinational. He's had a long and successful career in park management in the Caribbean, and is currently the Vice Chair for WCPA in the Caribbean. So Lloyd,
thank you.
Do you want to use that or this one?
No. Can I just shout?
You can't get close to it.
Okay, good morning, colleagues. I'm going to give you some ideas about something we tried unofficially, following on our experiences with capacity development and delivering services and action based on the plans that people have used. And our experience shows essentially that, if you may excuse me while I find, okay, that for capacity development initiatives there have been much attention given to this over many, many years. And we are still concerned about the outcomes that we're seeing, the outcomes that are expected. And essentially, most of the current initiatives focus around individuals. Now we're talking more about competencies of individuals, but still mainly focus on individuals. We lose them, we train them, we lose them to other industries, we lose them for a number of reasons, and therefore, hence this sort of revolving, this circle you're seeing. But at the center of it is individuals. We do some work at the institutional level, but essentially not much past the institutions. And some of the capacity development discussion that is taking place now suggests that and recommend that you move to what they call the sort of enabling environment, the sort of larger situation in which these institutions and individuals work. But even that, in my mind, is somewhat limited. For us in the Caribbean, and I suspect for municipalities and small places, even in large countries, the situation in terms of who manages and what that looks like is very different. And it's more like this, where essentially the site is managed. There are many institutions with some level of authority over what happens in the site. So the site management institution may or may not, for example, have control over dealing with enforcement or pest outbreaks or concessions management or permitting for a range of uses in the site. And in those cases, certainly and might not have all the competences, engineers, the rest of it. In fairly large systems, there are compartments or units that provide that technical support, but in small systems, they're essentially provided by other institutions. And therefore, often the capacity development needs to take place in several institutions for you to see the outcomes on the site. Coming here, we decided, and I'm going to quickly get to a small test we ran unofficially, but just to prove the point, before coming here, I did a survey using SurveyMonkey just to verify for your purpose what I just said. And essentially, what you're seeing is this summary. For most of the respondents, and there were 41, as you can see, from 20 countries, two from an area that's not even in the Caribbean, Honduras and Belize. Well, they're on the edge, but not within the WCPA area. And effectively, most of the persons that responded skipped the questions having to do with their specific responsibilities. Who monitors, who handles health and safety issues, who does fire control and disaster management. For some reason, either they have not thought about it or they don't know enough about the institutions that they work with to provide information on their other institutions. And so it is not that it doesn't happen, but it does not happen through that specific management institution. And this is just two slides to show you, to give you some idea of what I just said. The blue, the large area, says that responsibility for management is shared among all the institutions with regulatory authority. And in most of the questionnaires, the respondents, this was from about 3 to 5 institutions. and that's regulator authority, not all the supporting institutions. And so if you look at this, this becomes a little scary in terms of where you apply your capacity development initiative. If you, there are a lot of other things, but I know time is run, so I will just share this other one. And essentially it says that for most of the sites, we know what it is supposed to look like on paper because it's in a law someplace, but we have no idea where these boundaries are. We have never been marked on the ground. There are no maps showing which river connects to which street or whatever it is. And therefore, if we're talking capacity for management, how do we actually translate what we want done to action on the ground if we don't even know where these sites are supposed to be? How do we communicate that to communities and our partners? To step back, just a little earlier in terms of what we were recommending given our experiences. And the focus for us is on institutional networks. So if you're designing an intervention, design it for all institutions, and the purpose is not the institution that's managed. The purpose is effective management of the site. So you focus on the needs of the site. This requires to do some additional things, what we call asset mapping in all of the partner institutions. You have to figure out what the capacities are, what they bring to it, and what their needs are. It also links us to another argument that we're proposing, in that you focus on the site, not on the specific institutions, not what they would like to do, not what capacities or competencies they would like to have, but on the site itself. And the second major recommendation for us is that you design interventions around the work plans, and of course those work plans, or what we call workflows in this, should be linked specifically, directly to the purpose for which the site was designated and is supposed to be managed. Not what they're doing, not some work plan that was some management plan prepared by a consultant or somebody else that doesn't take it directly back to the purpose for which the site was designed. We tested this, a number of us had concern about it in our consulting work on the project, and we sort of tested it a little bit in a project in 2010, not on parks, but in a resource management institution. And essentially what we're doing is they were focused on wetlands management, both from the permitting and from the management side. And my colleague, the person who was running the project, actually used a geo-PDF tool, he calls it. What it allowed him to do as a data manager is to generate a map that you overlay on essentially a georeference area, and then the product is essentially just a PDF file, an Adobe file that any person can take into the field to data verification, site verification, and send that back to whoever generated the map. So you can have that updated over a large area very quickly by a number of people who do not necessarily have our GIS skills or the software or hardware. And so we were able to demonstrate that in 3 countries, and it worked very, very well. The institutions we used were basically all the project partners, so there were government institutions and non-profits that were involved in this process. For the client institution, the person who actually contracted us to do the work, government agents, it turned out that they had all the competencies that they needed. They were trained to use GIS, they had databases, they had hardware. You know, we knew these people, but for some reason we weren't seeing those competencies being, and that capacity being translated into the outcomes on the ground that we thought we should see. And so we did something a little differently for them, essentially to ask them how they were using the information and the resources. And it was scary what we found out, but in terms of the institution. But the results of that suggested that for the client management institution, it was essentially an issue of attitude. We got the surveys back, and then we went through an exercise with them, with some of their managers, to demonstrate how easy it was to use information that they had in their system, or that somebody 2 doors down in the same department had just collected a few weeks before in the field, how easy it was to incorporate that into their decision processes. And the scary part was that they started making excuses right in the meeting in front of their managers, so that was a little interesting. On the positive side, all the stakeholders that participated in the project continued to use some of the products, and we found that they, over the 4 years that we did this, since we did that, They use it in other projects that they did, and they have been coming to, well, not to me, but to my colleague who works for a university in terms of collaborating on other projects using the approach. And even recently a government agency, the Agriculture Department, came to him to help move their system in terms of data collection and field verification. So our conclusion in this is that some of the expected and unexpected outcomes from using this collaborative method actually is great, simply because it allows capacity in a range of institutions, it adjusts some attitudes, and it opens up some possibilities for them in terms of, even if they don't have the institutional capacity to deliver on some of these things, they now know how to link it with other institutions that are in the same network or in the same area, and therefore it makes their lives easier in terms of designing all the funds they bring to it. Unfortunately, we were hoping to bring the results of 2 case studies focused on 2 different parks in 2 countries, and getting the governments to do this is a little harder than having the NGOs do it, so we were not allowed to finalize those arrangements, so we don't have park-specific case studies for you. Thank you.